Hey guys, and welcome back to day 5 of this 10-day algebra series. Today we are going to be looking at solving quadratic. So starting with some examples where a, or the number in front of your x squared, is 1, we know from FOILing that this is going to be x plus something times x plus or minus something, which since we're multiplying to get a negative, we know that our second one would have to be negative, so that when they multiply out, we're left with that negative constant. If they were both positive or both negative, that would make that constant positive. So we know one has to be positive, one has to be negative. We just have to figure out what those numbers are. If you've ever done diamond problems before, this is exactly what that is. And if you want to see a whole video on diamond problems, I'll link that in the description box below. But basically, diamond problems are you're looking for two numbers that add to get the top number and multiply to get the bottom number. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to get us -8 and add to get us 2. So I always start by listing my multiples, which for 8 are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. But remember, one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and they need to add to get us a positive 2. All right, and so since one's positive and one's negative, my larger number is going to be the positive since my answer is positive. So a positive 4 and a negative 2 would be our two numbers that would solve that diamond problem, which is exactly what factoring is. We're just going to rewrite it as x plus 4 since it was a positive 4 times x minus 2 since it was a negative 2. Now you can test this out and actually see if we were to multiply this out, we would get that exact same thing we had originally. From here, we can use our zero product property, which tells us we can set both of those equal to 0 and then solve for x. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides to get that x is -4, and we're going to add 2 to both sides to get that x is 2. In these examples we're looking at today, we're going to have two solutions. However, there is the possibility for one solution or no solutions, and I will put a video for some of those examples down below. All right, remember I said if we were to multiply this out, we should get the original, which x times x would get us x squared. X times -2 would be -2x. 4 times x would be that positive 4x, which then when we combine those, we would get 2x. And then lastly, our positive 4 times a -2 to get our -8. So notice how if we factor it out, we should be able to get the original. So you can actually check these. You could also plug in your -4 and 2 into the original to make sure it works out. Now with my second example here, notice it is not equal to 0, so I have to get it equal to 0 first by adding 2 to both sides of my equation. Then it becomes x squared minus 10n plus 24. So remember, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to get us our constant and add to get us our number in front of x or n, which I am now realizing I made this with x and n. They're supposed to be the same variable, so we'll see what I go with to finish this. I apologize for that. You cannot combine x squared and 10n. We're going to pretend they're the same variable for right now. So I just listed my factors of 24. And it's positive, so that means they are either both positive or both negative, but since they're adding to get us a negative, we know that both numbers would have to be negative, so that they add to get us a negative and multiply to get us a positive. All right, and looking at my options here, a -4 and a -6 would add to get me that -10 and would also multiply to get me the positive 24, which looks like I finished out with going with x. So where there's that n there, just pretend it's an x. That was my bad. After I have it factored, from here I just set both of those pieces equal to 0 and solve. So I'm getting that x is a +4 or that x is a +6. And again, I could distribute this out, make sure it works, and I could also plug in those answers to the original to also make sure it works, and I have the answer correct. So you can guarantee you got these right, just like regular equations. Which whenever you can double check your work in math, I highly suggest it because it's so easy to make a mistake. Moving on to an example where we have a number other than 1 in front of our x. And again, first step, it has to equal 0 first, so I'm subtracting 5 from both sides and then just rewriting the equation so that it's equal to 0. From here, since we have that number in front of our x squared, we can't just rewrite it as x plus something, x minus something, because we need a number in front of that x squared. All right, so I have a different strategy, which is by grouping, which I have a full video on this. If you want more examples at the end, I will link that down in the description box below. But basically, instead of just looking for two numbers that multiply to get us that -12, we have to multiply that by the number in front of our x squared. So we're actually looking for two numbers that multiply to get us 3 times -12, which is a -36, and then that add to get us a -16. Right, since it's multiplying to get us a negative, we know one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. And since it's adding to get us a -16, we know our negative would be the bigger number in this case, which a +2 and a -18 would add to get us that -16. Okay, but remember, we can't just rewrite it as x plus something, x minus something, because we have that 3 in front that we have to account for. So I am going to rewrite the middle with those two new numbers I got. So instead of -16x, I'm going to rewrite it as +2x minus 18x. And you could put those in reverse order. It would still work out the same way, either way you did it. But you just have to rewrite that middle as those two new numbers and recognize if I combine those, it would mean the same exact thing as my original equation. The reason I wanted to do that is because now I have 4 terms, so I can group my first two together and my last two together, and then just factor out of those pieces. So of that first piece, I can't divide 3 and 2 by the same thing, but I could take out an x, so that the inside would become 3x plus 2. Notice if I distribute that x on, it would mean that same thing as above. With the second part, I have a -18 and a -12. So I could divide both of those by a -6, so that I'm left with 3x plus 2 on the inside. Now notice those insides match, and if you did it right, they should match every time. All right, that's why I had to take out the -6, because if I just took out a +6, it'd be -3x minus 2, which does not work out. They have to match up, because then if they match up, you can rewrite it as those parts that match, and then the parts that were taken out of them. So that x minus 6 would be our second term. Now you can test this out. Go ahead and do your FOIL. It should get you the same thing as that original. Now remember, this whole thing equals 0, so our last step is to set both of these equal to 0 and solve for x. So in that first one, I have to subtract 2. So 3x equals -2, and then divide by 3 to get that x is a -2/3. In my second one, I'm just going to add 6 to both sides to get that our x is a +6. So again, with this example, we had 2 solutions. Now there's actually a strategy that will work for any type of quadratic as long as it's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And that is called the quadratic formula. So this is a formula to find our 2 solutions, which we would just plug in -b plus or minus, that's how you end up getting your 2 solutions, b squared minus 4ac, and we're taking the square root of that, and then the whole thing divided by 2 times your a. So remember, your a is the number in front of your x squared. So like in this example here, 3 would be our a, and so anywhere in that equation we had a, we would replace it with a 3. Same thing with our b. Your b is the number in front of x, which in this example was a -16. So anywhere there is a b, we would replace that with -16. All right, now since it's a negative b, a -16, or the opposite of -16, that would actually become a +16. And then in there where we have the b squared, we'd also put our -16. And lastly, c, our constant, which we have to be careful because it's your constant when it's set equal to 0. So we would be using that -12, not -7. So where there's that c, we would be multiplying it by -12. All right, so from here, you're going to do your b squared minus your 4 times your a times your c. And then you're going to take 16 plus the square root of that divided by 2 times 3, which is 6. and then you're going to do that 16 minus that square root divided by your 2 times 3. And that should get you the same two solutions we got before with our other strategy. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Check out those other videos in the description box below and make sure you follow so you don't miss any future videos from me. I'll see you in the next one.